It's been a busy edition of the Sports Cubicle here on WCPT and Heartland Signal. I'm your host, Mike Mercado, and it is so busy. Coming back into the studio is Paul Chivari and our best friend of the show, Rich Eberwein. Of course, you can check him out over at Cubby's Crib and heartlandsignal.com. And there's been some moves here in Chicago. You may have heard early on the show what was going on with Juan Soto. Well, the two Chicago teams have found a way to enter the chat when it comes to being part of big moves this offseason. For the Chicago White Sox, they sent Garrett Crochet to the Boston Red Sox, a Sox on Sox deal. And now Kyle Tucker is heading to Chicago from Houston. Lesneski and a Paredes and a number one overall pick are heading to Houston. To break it down is Rich, but Rich, there is some good when you're talking about Kyle Tucker, right? A +4 WAR player, somebody who can hit 30 to 40 bombs, somebody who can steal the base, who's going to be good in right field. The bad, the contract. It's not going to be guaranteed for a long time. There's going to be a lot of money that the Cubs are going to have to invest in this player if they're in that type of ball game in a year from now. What did you think when you heard the deal? What is the good? What is the bad of Kyle Tucker now being the new right fielder and the new power hitter for the Chicago Cubs?
I mean, this is a type of player that the Cubs have not had on their roster basically since 2021 when they traded Chris Bryant, Anthony Rizzo, and Javier Baez. This is a guy who, if Juan Soto, Aaron Judge, and guys like that are in the upper echelon, I see Kyle Tucker in the tier like just below them. He is a guy when he's healthy, is a consistent 5+ WAR player. Like you said, he plays excellent defense. He can swipe bags. He can hit home runs, hit for power. He is that type of superstar bat that, the Cubs have desperately needed these last 2 years, right? They've had back-to-back 83-win seasons where they have a lot of, 2 and 3 WAR position players and pitchers, but they've been lacking that star level MVP caliber talent. And Kyle Tucker checks that box. Last year, he only played 78 games and still hit 23 home runs, drove in 49, and accumulated a 4.7 WAR. If he played a full season, he was knocking on the door of an MVP. This is the type of player he is, and he instantly will transform this lineup. This move creates, a problem at third base for the Cubs for sure, because you just traded away your starting third baseman and one of the main depth pieces at third base as well. But I think it's worth it. And, he's only under contract for 1 year, but this is a play for 2025. We're competing in 2025. The Brewers are taking a step back. The Cardinals are about to start a rebuild. And this is an opportunity for the Cubs to cement themselves in the NL Central and compete for that division title.
So here's something I wanted to bring up, and I want to throw it to you, Rich, when you hear this. This is from Andy Martinez over at Marquee. Kyle Tucker is the star bat the Cubs were looking for. Just how much of a difference would Kyle Tucker make on the Cubs offense? Well, here's where he would have ranked on the 2024 Cubs in all major statistical categories. In home runs with 23, he would have been second. RBI, 7th. Stole a base in 6th. Average, 2nd. OBP, slugging, OPS, and wins among replacement would be 1st. And his FWAR would be 2nd. That all have been in 78 games.
Yeah.
He would have been that on this Cubs offense in 78 games.
Less than half a season's worth of games.
So when you hear that, and then you hear Cub fans who, on the surface hear the trade, the haul, and the rumors heading before this and are worried if this was a big deal, a big haul for a 1-year non-guaranteed player, what do you tell them when you see these numbers and you have to explain to them the type of talent and the risk? Is it worth the squeeze?
I think it is. So there's 1 year of Kyle Tucker, right? But if he's on the Cubs this year and he has that type of season where, he again, like if he is very easily, if he plays a full season, probably going to lead the Cubs' entire offense in a lot of statistical categories, right? If he has a season like that and the fans are going to latch onto him instantly. Like I said, they have been starved for star talent since basically Chris Bryant and Anthony Rizzo were traded. They need a guy like this just to give fans some life, right? I think if he has that kind of season and the fans see that, they are going to latch onto him, and hopefully they'll be in a position better than anybody to sign a contract extension with him. Um, you know, I the Cubs have been notoriously penny pinching the last few seasons, but if there is a guy other than Juan Soto to sign that the Cubs should pursue for a contract extension like this, a $300 million plus deal, it's Kyle Tucker. Um, so I think, is the juice worth the squeeze? Yeah, because you gave up the main piece here is Isaac Paredes, right? Like you've been trying to fill the hole at third base again since Chris Bryant was traded, and he is a solid third baseman. He has 25 plus home run potential. He's going to hit a lot of bombs in Minute Maid Park. Like that is a park made for a guy like Isaac Paredes, right? He plays solid defense at third base. And he's got 3 years of team control. So the Cubs have some work to do to figure out what they're going to do at the hot corner. I actually just wrote a piece that's going up on Cubby's Crib later today, what their options are. I think Matt Shaw is probably, the most logical option at this point, who is on the roster unless they bring in a free agent. But the free agency depth at third base is pretty light this year, aside from Alex Bregman, which, if the Cubs want to go and just purge another Astros star player, go for it. I'm here for it. Prove me wrong, Tom Ricketts. Sign that deal. But other than Bregman, there's a lot of, it's a lot of like platoon or depth pieces that are on the free agent market at third base. So you could sign one of those guys on a short-term deal, have him start the season at third base, and then pass the baton to Shaw maybe later on. You could move Cody Bellinger to first base and shift Michael Busch over to third, which is not a strong position for him defensively. And I would not like that. That's not a great option because Michael Busch took a nice step forward at the plate and defensively last year. So I would like to keep him at first base where he's comfortable. Shifting him to a position where he's not comfortable could, see a regression at the plate as well. And I don't want that. Other than that, it's like you got Miles Mastrobuoni, who is a bench player, and you got to figure out third base for sure because the third guy that they sent over to the Astros is Cam Smith, first round pick from 2024. I'm not as broken up about Cam Smith moving as a lot of people on Cubs Twitter are. He's a good player, right? Like he's probably going to be a decent major league player, but we don't know that yet. He's still a prospect. He has played 32 games of professional baseball in his life. We don't know if, how many prospects have come and gone where we were like, this is the future center fielder, Brennan Davis, Braylon Marquez is the future closer. Prospects come up and then their stock goes down. Like they come, they rise, they fall. For a guy who just got drafted a few months ago, Cam Smith's stock was extremely high, and I think the Cubs made a smart move taking advantage of that and making him one of the centerpieces of this deal. So those are my initial thoughts on this. I think it is a package that was worth sending for a player of Kyle Tucker's caliber.
Paulie, before we head to the south side, you see Kyle Tucker heading to the Cubs for Paredes, Wisniewski, and Cam Smith. You know what the contract looks like. You know what it's going to look like next offseason. And just for clarity, this isn't a Scott Boras client. So your thoughts, Paul, before we head to the White Sox being on the other end of a deal kind of like this. What did you think when you saw the news from all the big baseball reporters that Kyle Tucker was now a Chicago Cub?
Well, I was glad the Cubs didn't give up too much to get Tucker, and I would think that they're going to offer him a long-term deal when it's all said and done. But like Rich was saying, the lack of depth at third base, I think, is concerning. I know they got Gage Workman, who has the best middle name, by the way. They got him in the Rule 5 draft. His middle name is Hater, at least according to his baseball reference page. But since they got him, I'd imagine that unless they go and get Bregman or a Matt Duffy or whoever's available free agent wise, it's probably going to be Gage Workman or Matt Shaw fighting for the job, or perhaps BJ Murray. It's concerning that there's not a lot of experience above Double A with all three of those names. Especially, I think Workman has yet to even play above Double A. So that's a little concerning. But at the same time, the Cubs have the money. They have a great lineup now that they've added Tucker to it. I didn't expect Paredes to get traded that early after they acquired him from Morel in the summer. But it seems like the Cubs are on the move, and it's about time, because I feel like since the last couple of seasons when they cleaned house, we were expecting them to spend a little bit more money and take it to the next level. And I think acquiring Tucker is very aggressive and probably the right move for them right now. Let's just see if it transfers into wins.
It's going to be interesting how the next few weeks play out. Obviously, as of right now, we don't know exactly what's going on for Cody Bellinger. It seems like maybe to the Yankees. That is something that Rich and I have talked off mic. Is it addition by subtraction? Are you better right now? What is the goal ultimately for the Ricketts, Jed Hoyer, and this entire organization moving forward? And this is one step towards trying to be competitive in 2025, not looking towards 26, 27, trying to take advantage of the CBA that they're in right now. We'll circle back to the Chicago Cubs getting Kyle Tucker from the Houston Astros, as Rich Eberwine, best friend of the show, joining us from Cubby's Crib and, of course, HeartlandSignal.com. I'm Mike Mercado. I'm joined, of course, with Paul Chivari. And speaking of Paulie, an interesting moment here as well. The Red Sox acquired Garrett Crochet from the White Sox for catcher Kyle Teal, outfielder Brandon Montgomery, infielder Chase Mydrift, and right-hander Joaquin Gonzalez. So, Paulie, this is the second time a major pitcher for the Chicago White Sox is heading to the other Sox team. And I want to know, what did you think when that trade dropped, when that big bomb was sent out there to the baseball universe? Not only what you thought, but your feelings and the vibes this time around with the Crochet deal compared to the Sale deal.
Well, this one differs in the sense that I'm a completely broken husk of the man that I was in 2016, thanks to the Chicago White Sox. So I don't think I have the sentimental attachment to Garrett Crochet like I had with Chris Sale. And arguably, you could say Sale is maybe the better left-handed pitcher between the two of them, although Crochet's story has yet to be written, whereas Sale is riding the crest of his wave right now and won the NL Cy Young. So so I wasn't torn up by the trade. And with the return on prospects, I don't take too much stock anymore into the position rankings of prospects, but you're taking one of the greatest league-wide prospects in catching in Kyle Teal, but at the same time, you had the previous regime bring in Cody Lee at the trade deadline 2 years ago, as well as Edgar Cuero. So I don't know what they want to do catching wise, with the depth in their organization. And I don't know if the White Sox truly need to be trotting out young catchers for the foreseeable future, how that's going to help their pitching staff. So I think that, eventually they're going to get rid of one, maybe two of the catching prospects that they have. And we have yet to see what's going to happen there. As far as Mydroth is supposed to be an on-base machine. So we'll see if that translates to the major league level. Joaquin Gonzalez kind of felt like like a throw-in this deal. He's kind of regressed in terms of where he's ranked in the position for their prospects over the last few years, kind of dropped down a little bit. The real one is going to be Braden Montgomery. Injuries have kept him down over the last couple seasons, so he has really yet to make his professional debut. So we'll see what type of player that is. But I guess one thing that the White Sox can count on from him in the foreseeable future is that he does have some pitching experience, despite the fact that he is a very great hitter. I wouldn't read too much into the pitching experience other than the fact that he has it, because it's a career 9 ERA in 34 innings of college. But at the same time, the White Sox probably do plan on getting beaten to a bloody pulp in their games, and a position player that can pitch, I think, is always helpful. So perhaps that'll bode well for him.
Rich, when you saw this deal, I saw you tweet out and you mentioned you thought it was a pretty good haul for the White Sox. So where are you if you were scouting this team looking forward to 25 and 26? They put themselves in a position to kind of start building a foundation and try to do something with this new regime, kind of trying to do whatever Jerry Reinsdorf wants this version of the White Sox to be? Or is there still going to need to be some time to see how this plays out for this trade?
Yeah, I mean, I think Kyle Teal and Braden Montgomery are two guys that could be, long-term pieces for the White Sox. Like Paul said, they have three top catching prospects slash young players now, and that's extremely valuable. Not just like for the future of your team, but trade-wise later on. The young catching prospects and young good catchers are just so hard. There's such a hot commodity and so hard to acquire and develop. So that is a nice area of depth that I like for the White Sox right now. Teal could even he was talking about this on Twitter, I think, like he could even transition to like a first baseman maybe down the line. Just to keep his bat around, which is an interesting idea. But Braden Montgomery, yeah, he is like a power hitting outfielder that could be like a cornerstone of your offense for years to come. Again, a prospect who was just drafted in the first round this past year. So it remains to be seen how he develops and how the White Sox develop him, which has obviously been a problem for them and over the last however many years. But I really like the haul. I think it was smart to strike while the iron was hot with Garrett Crochet. His stock was extremely high after, he's one of, I saw some stat on Twitter. It was like one of four pitchers in the last however many years to accumulate 200 strikeouts in less than 150 innings pitched. He is this was also the first year he was a starting pitcher. So there is a lot of risk with him involved. And I think getting a haul like this was an awesome deal for the White Sox.
So why don't we do this? Because we still have a jam-packed edition of the Sports Cubicle. If you're listening to us over on WCPT, Heartland Signal, or on SoundCloud, visit us. Come join us over at the YouTube channel, over at the Sports Cubicle. We're going to break down a little bit more of Crochet, the White Sox future, and of course, head back to the North Side to talk some Kyle Tucker. But until then, why don't we thank, of course, Rich Eberwein for joining us over at Cubby's Crib and Heartland Signal. And thank you, Paulie, for jumping back into the studio to talk some big time trades for the Cubs and White Sox. And thank you all again for all the support for this baseball talk, because the hot stove really is heating up in Chicago. And here on the Sports Cubicle, we'll be breaking it down even more if some more trades, some more movement for the Cubs and White Sox. We got more coming up next on this edition of the Sports Cubicle, a busy edition of the Sports Cubicle. I'm your host, Mike Mercado. Now, if you are back with us on the YouTube channel, thank you for sticking with us. Make sure you guys subscribe to us here at the YouTube channel at the Sports Cubicle and all the other places. Just Google us, just support us, and of course, Rich as well. But why don't we go back to the north side? We'll jump to the south side to finish up the conversation. But for the people here at YouTube, I think if you're a Cub fan or if you're just interested about baseball, now you have to start talking about lineup construction. Because it seems to me, and Rich, I'll throw it to you, because it seems to me that this move really does indicate 2025 is the goal, that they are competing. They think the division is at a downturn, even if they don't even add so much, let's say, star power. The fact that Craig Counsell is your manager, I've always been under the belief, it's always been my theory that they brought him to work with less, to get the most out of players. So if they think they can strike now and just get in the big dance, what is this lineup going to look like next season if Cody Bellinger is gone? If the big move this offseason was Kyle Tucker and the next biggest move is in the pitching rotation, can this lineup without Bellinger and the way it looks with the Tucker move, can it compete even in a NL Central that's down when you have to go against the likes of, Paul Skeens, and Cincinnati has a real manager now? Is that going to be enough?
There was a lot of smoke around Cody Bellinger moving. The Yankees were also in on this Kyle Tucker deal, right? They were making offers to the Astros, and for a variety of reasons, I think that kind of fell apart. One of them being that, the Astros and the Yankees are constantly main competitors in the ALCS with each other. Like they consistently have to go through each other in the playoffs. So I think they're kind of gun shy to deal with each other. The Astros were gun shy to deal a player like Tucker's caliber to the Yankees. So, and the Yankees need a left-handed power bat. So if the Cubs are looking to shed more payroll, which it seemingly seems like they are, Cody Bellinger to the Yankees makes a lot of sense. I don't. I think you need to reinvest that money somewhere, some way, somehow to make the lineup better after you do that. I know John Heyman was talking about them being in on Pete Alonso. I seriously doubt that's going to happen, however much I would love that. Um, Maybe you just go out and sign Alex Bregman. That would make the most sense to me, because that's the biggest hole you have now after Paredes is off the roster. Um, like I said, Michael Busch, you don't want to move off of first base. Nico Horner's got second, unless you flip him somewhere. Shortstop is locked up by Dansby. The outfield, there's a massive log jam. You just brought in Tucker. You still have Suzuki, Pico Armstrong, Ian Happ. Like, moving Bellinger and then signing a third baseman makes the most sense to me right now for what, to improve and compete in 2025. Because after moving Bellinger, it's like, okay, well, you got rid of two major league hitters now and brought in one. It's like Tucker is a clear upgrade to both of them, but you still need some more firepower to supplement the loss of Bellinger after that. So I think there is definitely a lot of work to be done still. This is not, I don't think the Cubs are a finished product at this point in time.
Do you think, and Paul, I'm going to throw it to you so we can head back to the south side as we wrap it up. But uh, do you think if you bring in, whether it's Shaw or if it's, you move people around, isn't that maybe the entire reason you did spend all that money in a manager, though? Like, we know within the margins what a lot of teams believe about managers and how a lot of organizations believe that they should just be an extension of the front office. But if you're doing what the Cubs are doing right now, and let's say there isn't a Bregman coming down and it is just going to be somebody internally, somebody they bring up, isn't that more likely? And while you're shedding salary because you're looking to the future of what contract's going to look like in the next few years, doesn't it kind of play out more if we're doing that type of road? Doesn't that makes more sense for the Cubs team that they're just really taking an approach that, while it may seem big, kind of is what they've always planned from the beginning, where it's to try to get the most out of players as cheap as possible?
My philosophy on forming a baseball club is that you don't need to spend the Juan Soto money, and buy a bunch of guys like the Mets and the Yankees and the Dodgers can do. But at the same time, the Cubs, I would think, are in the market and have the ownership where they could financially compete with those teams. I don't like spending dumb money. At the same time, I think if you're clearing payroll, as the Cubs have been doing for the last few years, then you do have to give a long-term contract to a Kyle Tucker or someone that you truly believe can help this franchise in the coming years. So me personally, I think they should keep Bellinger and go from there, and look after Alex Bregman and see what you got going into 2025, because I think that's a good enough core where maybe adding someone like a Bregman and now a Tucker could make up the fact that you're kind of weak in the catching position, for the fact that maybe you're relying maybe too much on Busch to compete like other first basemen can at that position, especially if you're not going to go after a Pete Alonso in that case. Yeah, so I mean, I think on one hand, it's smart to dump payroll and kind of build for the future, as long as you are building for the future and will be in on big name free agents. But at the same time, the Cubs have never, since they shed payroll in 2021, have never really been in the conversation realistically with the big name free agents like Juan Soto and Shohei Ohtani. So it's kind of a double-edged sword where, yeah, they're not committed to dumb money, but it should have equaled a championship over the last couple of seasons, and we haven't seen it. So they're at a turning point right now. We're going to see if they are going to spend money and bring in a big name free agent in addition to this, or if they're just kind of like what the St. Louis Cardinals have been doing for the longest time, where, you're kind of giving away some good guys, but you're also acquiring some good guys, and it provides the sustainability. And I haven't seen it with the Cubs yet, but I do like what they've been doing. And I really do believe that their front office has been wise in the post Theo Epstein, post championship era. But at the same time, maybe they've been too conservative.
Rich, before I throw it back to Paul to wrap things up about the White Sox, did you have something you wanted to jump in? Because I kind of threw out there something I've talked to you before about, is what I've always thought the big thesis, the grand plan for the Ricketts and management was in total since the Craig Counsell move. Did you have anything you want to add on before we jump to the South Side?
I for however much I complain about the Cubs not spending money. Their payroll was I think around like $230 million last year, which is not chump change compared to a lot of other teams, right? Um, so I don't think they're just not going to spend money at all for the foreseeable future, which, is why I think Kyle Tucker, like a long-term deal for Kyle Tucker is smart. Because you're saving money in a lot of other places, especially if like Matt Shaw is going to be your first baseman or your third baseman moving forward. You have a lot of guys on cheap deals then, like Bush, Shaw, Nico Horner has a team-friendly deal. And then maybe when guys like Suzuki and Happ reach free agency, you just roll with your outfield prospects, maybe. I don't know. I don't know what the game plan is, because another big aspect to this is Jed Hoyer's contract is up after the 2025 season. And I think in trying to get a player like Kyle Tucker and actually trading for him, you're kind of playing for your job. It's kind of playoff or bust for Jed Hoyer, in my opinion. Um, so I think 2025 is the goal, and I think signing a player, another big bat right now would make a lot of sense. If you're playing for your job like you are, Jed Hoyer. So I think Bregman, Pete Alonso should be on their radar. Will they do it? Probably not, but yeah, that remains to be seen. I would anticipate Cody Bellinger moving, and then after that, we'll see what they do.
Well, so we've been, obviously it's interesting talking one way about a trade where you're getting the star, you're sending over the prospects, and the more of the big haul, right? The pieces that are being moved. And in the case of the White Sox, they're the ones who sent the star over, sent them to the big organization, and now are hoping to start building their foundation. If all the White Sox baseball you've watched, obviously all of it that you've scouted and you've done the deep dives throughout the years, does this one feel like and it's hard to say, right? But like just off the trade and how the organization has been, what maybe the goal is long term, what the organizationally where it's going to play long term, all those stuff. Does it feel like this was the right move? Like, oh, yeah, even if it doesn't work out, like only one player hits, whatever. This was the right trade. This was the right move. They are doing the right thing right now. Does it feel like a competent move by a competent organization, or an ignorant organization trying to get competent, or is it just more of the same and you kind of lost they've lost the goodwill?
It works out for both sides, Crochet and the White Sox, because Crochet is not going to waste some of his best years on a team that's not going anywhere. And the White Sox would not have been able to give him the long-term deal that he was looking for, so he would have just walked away. So, you still need to have bodies at all levels. So from that standpoint, at the very least, just having a warm body filling a position is good for organizational depth. But yeah, I mean, if one or two of these guys hits and is playing, every day at the major league level for you in a couple of years, yeah, I think the trade has made sense. As far as who won the trade, who lost the trade, that's really hard to say because it's so early. My instincts say the Red Sox probably won the trade, but that's largely because I just don't have confidence that the White Sox can develop players. But yeah, this trade at least made it look like that Chris Getz is better at negotiating than what we thought. But I mean, the jury's still out for me. I'd love to see one of these players actually pan out, but they all might be mid-level guys or guys that don't even make it to the major league level. And then what? And then are they constantly selling themselves short and then letting good players walk away because they weren't able to have all these lottery tickets hit at the right time?
So what about okay, let me set it up the question like this, Paul, because the Bulls, same ownership, right? Kept Zach LaVine. They traded DeMar. They changed their team. They're trying to do through the draft, and they still have to sell tickets. And they're in the 10th seed of the playoffs, and that means nothing. But they got it. They still, like you said, right? They need bodies. Business still needs to go on. If you're the White Sox, Luis Robert, are you trading him? Are you waiting throughout the season? Are you waiting till spring? Where do the White Sox go? Where would you go? Because obviously this is a rebuild, and maybe his value isn't as high as it can be, but there's no guarantee that the stock will be anywhere that you projected it to be or that it can be. So personally? And then what do you think the organization will do with Luis Robert? Because at some point, you still need people, even if it's just a few thousand, to show up to the South Side, to what, 35th and Shields. Like, it still needs to happen. So what do you think about that?
I mean, I guess Robert probably doesn't have the value. I mean, from what I've seen when they dangle him out there, other executives are even being quoted saying that the White Sox are asking for too much for him, and for the way the White Sox valued him by having him sign that contract before he even stepped foot on a major league diamond. They're unfortunately tied into that value, and he's overvalued based on something that they thought at the time was going to be a complete undervalue and team friendly deal. They thought they were getting Mike Trout, and I don't know what the comp is that they got, but it's the only reason he was an all-star is because each team has to have a representative, right? Like I don't remember his numbers being dropping off the page, and if I remember correctly, the season he was an all-star, when the voting started, there was kind of confusion as to who the representative would be before he had a great June that really solidified it for himself. So I think the smart thing to do would be, because I think he's still under team control for more than just the season. And even if he's not, if it is just the season, you may as well roll the dice and see if he can stay healthy and produce at a higher level. And if it is this contract year, maybe he'll have a little bit of incentive to try a little bit harder, at least put up a bigger numbers. So yeah, trading him now, I don't think is going to do you any service, but at the same time, you might have missed your window and it might have been 2 years ago to trade him.
So this has been a lot of fun. I think we should leave it on this, a big picture baseball question, as we have been breaking down Kyle Tucker heading to the Chicago Cubs from the Houston Astros, Crochet from the White Sox to the Red Sox, Garrett Crochet, that is. And I think it's kind of cool that this is the first time Rich Eberwine, who is from Cubby's Crib and Heartland Signo, is joining myself, Mike Mercado, and Paul Chivari for this trio of baseball talk. This is a lot of fun. I can't wait until spring training comes around so we can do a little bit more of this. But why don't we end with big picture? And last season, we saw a lot of superstars sign late. This season, this offseason, that's not the case. A lot of Scott Boras people, but from Snell to now what we've seen with Juan Soto, dominoes are moving, pieces are moving. It's been a fast-paced winter. For the people who don't keep up day to day or don't understand the intricacies of these type of seasons, why has it been such a fast-moving offseason, in your opinion, by some of these teams? I'll start with you, Rich, because I know a lot of people always have their theories, whether it's because the first big domino fell, everybody now has to set their roster, whether it's because they're getting their budgets ready, whatever, whether there's a new TV deal, there's always 1,000 reasons. But why do you think this season, more than others, seems to be such a high, fast-paced offseason compared to other ones? Rich?
I'm not like entirely sure. I feel like a lot of the major free agents waited until the last minute, like you said last year, which was frustrating for us as baseball fans because you had this like dead like November and December and into January where it's just like there's nothing happening. I think a lot of it has to do with Juan Soto. I mean, the Dodgers also kind of set the market, like the starting pitching market, really early when they signed Blake Snell. So that kind of had a lot to do with it, in my opinion, too. When those first dominoes fall, then everything else kind of starts setting itself in motion. And I think there was obviously a massive appetite from a lot of big market teams for Juan Soto. They were making their pitches early and, committing massive dollars to this guy. The Yankees were in on him, the Mets, the Blue Jays, the Red Sox were reportedly in on him, the Dodgers were in the mix. Those teams wanted their dog, and the Mets got him. Steve Cohen struck again and set the market, and I think after that, you saw the Kyle Tucker trade market really start to heat up during the winter meetings and toward the end of it. And now, after he goes, I think you're going to see a lot more trades and signings. So I think it had a lot to do with Juan Soto.
Paul, you and I have done so many shows about these horrible off seasons and waiting until Januaries and Februarys over the years. Like, we've done plenty of them if you go back to the archives. This one of the fun ones. Is it the Juan Soto effect? And how much better does it make it for baseball fans? We're all football fans here, like diehard football fans. We're all in the fantasy league together, right? But it's cool that in December we get to talk baseball, specifically in the city of Chicago, teams that we watch, we root for, we cover. What was it about this offseason you think that really triggered it to be a fast one? And how good has it been for baseball fans and for the league to have such an intriguing offseason?
It's a good question because I wouldn't know the inside of these business deals to know why it ramped up this year versus other years. We got to remember that last offseason, Shohei Ohtani was the big fish, and it was about this time last year when he ended up signing with the Dodgers. And if I remember correctly, I thought we all thought it was a little earlier than we thought, like this was going to ride out past Christmas, because it's usually like there's that winter meetings in the early December, and there's a lot of activity, obviously, because everyone's all there together and they can just make deals quickly. But then it kind of dies down around the holidays. Not that it doesn't completely stop, because we've seen, posted pitchers from Japan get signed around Christmas, like Tanaka did, or I've seen White Sox have made trades in the past, around Christmas time. So it doesn't mean that things are going to totally stop. But now that I think some of the big guys are out of the way, the winter meetings are out of the way, there's probably going to be a lull over the next 2 or 3 weeks. And then in January, it'll ramp back up again. So I don't know. I mean, each off season is unique unto itself. But I would say that this time around, getting Soto and Snell out of the way really helped move things forward. So I would imagine that, boom, 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 we're going to see more things. I'm surprised that the Tucker deal happened so quickly. But of course, I don't think it would have happened this quickly if it wasn't for the winter meetings. And, obviously the Cubs, in anticipation of the trade, taking a third baseman in the Rule 5 draft, that might have moved things along too, that were maybe that pushed them to get more aggressive. So I don't know. That's a unique question. I'd love to take a deeper dive on that. But I think that obviously the bigger name free agents always kind of dictate how the rest of things are going to go.
We could do this all day. Everybody knows that I could talk football for hours and hours and hours, but these type of days with this type of crew, I could talk baseball just as long. There's nothing like some great stories around the diamond, especially when it's intriguing stories with the two huge franchises in Chicago, no matter how they like to perceive themselves or they're perceived around the league. These are two big time logos, two big time franchises, and they are right now ahead of all the news instead of course, the almost billionaire in Juan Soto. But hey, Cub bench, cheer up. You got Kyle Tucker and White Sox fans. Maybe you're building a foundation, but this was awesome. Rich, thank you so much for joining us, brother. You can go to Cubby's Crib and, of course, Heartland Signal to support Rich Eberwine. If you want to support Paul, which means you're supporting us, of course, subscribe to us over at the Sports Cubicle on YouTube. Check us out over on SoundCloud at the Sports Cubicle on WCPT 820, and of course at Heartland Signal. Rich, thank you so much, brother.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Paulie, thank you, my man.
5.8 million seconds until spring training games.
Let's go. Oh, it's right around the corner. Thank you all so much. I'm your host, Mike Mercado. We will see you next time.